Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is February 17th, 2026. If you're looking at your calendar and then, looking at the news feeds, you might be having a bit of deja vu. You might be asking yourself, why in the year 2026 are we still talking about this? And honestly, if you're feeling that fatigue, I get it. We all get it.
It's a completely reasonable question. The fatigue is real, but the reason we're still talking about it is that the story, well, it keeps changing. Or maybe the story just keeps getting clearer.
Exactly. We are talking, of course, about the Jeffrey Epstein case.
Yeah.
Even years after his death in a Manhattan jail cell, even years after Ghislaine Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, this story just refuses to fade into history.
It won't.
And I think that's largely because of what we have all lived through over the last, 18 months? 2024 and 2025 weren't just quiet years where we moved on. They were the years the dam finally broke.
It was an avalanche. That's really the only word for it. We saw the release of thousands upon thousands of pages of documents. We saw new photos we'd never seen before.
The flight logs.
We saw flight logs that had been redacted for a decade, suddenly laid bare. And perhaps most importantly, we saw grand jury transcripts from 2006 that have been sealed under lock and key.
And we can't ignore the political firestorm that came with it. I mean, the last 2 years have been dominated by headlines about the list.
The list.
We've had everyone from the current administration to, teenage sleuths on TikTok digging through these files looking for a smoking gun. It's been chaotic.
It has.
But today, our mission on the Deep Dive is a little different.
Right. We are not here to do the tabloid thing. We aren't here to rehash the sensationalism or, go down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories just for the clickbait.
Yeah.
We want to do something that I think has been missing from the mainstream conversation.
We want to take a forensic look at the timeline. Because when you actually sit down with this stack of new documents, and folks, it is a tall stack, and you layer it on top of what we already knew, a very specific, very disturbing picture emerges. This isn't just a true crime story about two predators. It's not just bad man does bad things.
No, it is a story about a massive 30-year systemic failure. That is the theme today.
That phrase kept ringing in my ears as I was prepping for this. Systemic failure. It feels like at every single turn, at every crossroad from 1996 to 2025, there was an off-ramp.
There was a chance.
There was a chance for the FBI, the local police, the banks, or the courts to stop this. And they didn't just miss the off-ramp, they seemingly barricaded it.
Precisely. We are talking about missed opportunities by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Department of Justice, local law enforcement in multiple states, and some of the largest financial institutions in the world.
And they had clear evidence.
They had clear evidence, often decades before the general public knew the extent of the crimes, and they failed to act.
Before we fully jump into the timeline, I do need to issue a quick tone warning. We are going to be discussing the abuse of minors and sex trafficking. We're going to keep this conversation respectful. We're focusing on the investigation, the legal failures, and the timeline. We are avoiding anything gratuitous or graphic, but the reality of what happened is heavy. It involves the exploitation of children. So please, take care of yourself while listening. If this isn't the right headspace for you today, that's completely okay. Come back when you're ready.
Absolutely. This is difficult material, but understanding the mechanism of how it was allowed to happen is, it's crucial if we want to prevent it from happening again.
Okay, so let's unpack this. I want to start way, way back. Because the narrative we often hear, the Netflix documentary version of events, is that this all came to light in the mid-2000s in Palm Beach, Florida.
Right.
That's the starting line for most people. But that is not true, is it?
Not at all. And this is one of the most frustrating, just heartbreaking parts of the files that were released in late 2024. We have to rewind the clock all the way back to 1996. I call this the lost decade.
1996. Wait, let's just set the scene for a second. The Macarena was the #1 song.
Yeah.
The internet was barely a thing. It feels like a lifetime ago. But there was a woman named Maria Farmer who was already sounding the alarm.
Maria Farmer is a name everyone needs to know. If you take one name away from this deep dive, let it be hers. She was a young, incredibly talented professional artist.
Right.
She was hired by Epstein under the guise of an art commission. It seemed legitimate, but in 1996, after escaping a horrific ordeal at the Ohio estate, she went to the authorities.
And she didn't just, whisper a rumor. She filed a report.
A formal report. She went to the New York Police Department and the FBI. She filed a formal complaint. She didn't just say, something weird is happening. She laid it all out.
In detail.
In detail. She described the abuse. She told them about the layout of the properties. She specifically told them about a safe where explicit images were kept. And crucially, she explicitly named both Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell.
She named Maxwell in 96. That just stops me in my tracks. Because for 20 years, the defense strategy for Ghislaine Maxwell was, I was just the girlfriend. I didn't know what he was doing.
Exactly. That was the shield she hid behind for 2 decades.
Yeah.
But Maria Farmer placed her at the center of the abuse as an active participant in 1996.
Wow.
She gave the FBI the roadmap to the entire criminal enterprise.
So, okay, you have a credible witness, you have a formal report, you have serious allegations involving the crossing of state lines, which makes it a federal issue, right?
Absolutely. It's an FBI matter from the jump.
So what did the FBI do with this roadmap?
Effectively, they threw it in the trash. The FBI did not open a formal investigation until May 2006.
10 years.
That is a 10-year gap.
That's just, it's mind-blowing. Trying to wrap my head around the implications of that. Think about the timeline. If the FBI knocks on that door in 1996.
If they execute a search warrant in 1996 based on her very specific testimony about that safe, the entire timeline changes. Countless future victims' girls who were toddlers in 1996 would have been spared.
The whole thing could have been stopped.
The entire trajectory of the last 30 years would be different.
Do we know why? Do these new files give us any excuse? Was it lost? Was it incompetence? Malice? What was it?
The files are maddeningly vague on the why, but they confirm the what.
Huh?
We know that agents actually visited Maria Farmer in 2006, a full decade later, and acknowledged they were there because of her 1996 report.
So it wasn't lost.
It wasn't lost. It was in the system. It was sitting in a file cabinet somewhere while Epstein was building his pyramid scheme of abuse. It just sat there.
That is the very definition of systemic failure. It's not that they didn't know, it's that they didn't care enough to act.
Yes.
So we had this lost decade where Epstein is operating with total impunity. He's building his wealth, he's building his network.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward to 2005. We're in Palm Beach, Florida. This is where the first official investigation that people know about begins.
Right, and it's important to note how this started. It wasn't the FBI finally waking up and swooping in. It was a parent. A stepmother in Palm Beach called the local police. She reported that her 14-year-old stepdaughter had been paid $300 to strip and massage Epstein at his mansion.
And I want to give credit where credit is due here. The Palm Beach police, specifically a detective named Joseph Reckery, he actually did his job initially, right?
So Detective Reckery did incredible work. He is really the hero of this chapter. He didn't brush it off. He didn't say, oh, that's just a rich guy being weird. He started digging.
He took it seriously.
He took it very seriously. He started surveillance. He went through the trash. And he found the pyramid scheme structure of the abuse.
Let's explain that for everyone, because that pyramid scheme aspect is what makes this so incredibly insidious.
It wasn't just Epstein finding victims randomly. He created a recruitment network. He would abuse a victim and then pay that victim, essentially offering a referral fee to recruit other girls.
They're friends.
Often their friends, their classmates, their cousins. He used the trust between teenage girls to entrap new victims. It was a way to ensure a constant supply, but it also did something much darker. It compromised the girls. It made them feel complicit.
It's psychological warfare. It's, you brought her here, so you're part of this now.
Exactly. You took the money. It silences them through guilt. But Reckery saw through that. He found the massage tables. He found the evidence. But here's where we hit a massive cultural and legal roadblock. The prosecutors at the time, and this is reflected in the grand jury transcripts that were released in 2024, had a very, very disturbing mindset.
This is the part that just makes my blood boil.
It should. The state prosecutors viewed these underage girls not as victims of child sex trafficking, but as prostitutes.
14-year-olds. We are talking about children.
It is a complete and total failure to understand power dynamics. In the eyes of the prosecutors, because money changed hands, it was prostitution. They devalued the testimony of these girls because they essentially labeled them as criminals.
They saw them as culpable.
Right. There is a transcript from a 2006 grand jury where a witness, a victim, is asked these aggressive questions about whether she understood she could be charged with a crime.
So instead of protecting the children, the system was gearing up to prosecute them, or at least using that threat to silence them.
Yes. It was a way to suppress the case. If the girls are criminals, then Epstein is just a John. It minimizes the crime from this vast trafficking conspiracy to simple solicitation. And that bias, that refusal to see their victimhood, is what allowed the deal of a lifetime to happen.
Okay, let's get into the deal.
Okay.
This is section 2 of our deep dive, the years 2006 to 2008. The FBI finally wakes up and opens Operation Leap Year.
Operation Leap Year. By this point, thanks to Recuria's local police work and the FBI finally coming in, they had a mountain of evidence.
This wasn't hearsay.
We are not talking about hearsay. We are talking about a 53-page draft indictment. The federal prosecutors had drafted a document that laid out charges for sex trafficking, conspiracy, enticing minors, the works.
And if that indictment had been filed, what were we looking at sentence-wise?
We were arguably looking at a life sentence, or at the very least, decades and decades behind bars. This was a slam-dunk federal case.
And yet he didn't go away for life. He didn't even go to federal prison. This brings us to Alexander Acosta, who was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida at the time.
Acosta is the central figure in this legal failure. Instead of proceeding with that 53-page federal indictment, he halted it.
He just stopped it.
He stopped it. He entered into negotiations with Epstein's high-powered legal team, which included guys like Ken Starr and Alan Dershowitz, and they cooked up a non-prosecution agreement, or NPA.
I want to pause on non-prosecution agreement. To the average listener, that sounds like, I don't know, just legal jargon. But in this context, it's bizarre, isn't it?
It is completely anomalous. It's almost unheard of. NPAs are tools designed for corporations. Let's say a big bank has a compliance error and, money gets laundered. The government might say, okay, we won't prosecute the bank criminally if you pay a massive fine, fire the bad actors, and agree to strict oversight. It is virtually unheard of to use an NPA for a sex offender, especially one operating a trafficking ring of this magnitude.
It's like giving a bank robber a warning and asking him to just return half the money.
It's worse, because the terms of this deal were just shocking. Epstein agreed to plead guilty to 2 state prostitution charges, not federal, state.
And the federal investigation would just
Go away, would just disappear.
So he pleads to 2 state charges. What was the sentence?
He was sentenced to 18 months. He served 13.
13 months. For abusing dozens, potentially hundreds of girls over a decade. And let's be very clear about the conditions of that confinement. He wasn't exactly in solitary, was he?
Oh, no. He was granted work release. This is another failure, this time at the local justice system. He was allowed to leave the jail for up to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, to go to his office in West Palm Beach.
So he slept at the jail, but he lived his life during the day.
Essentially. He had his own security detail with him. He was taking meetings. It was a complete mockery of incarceration. But honestly, the jail time isn't even the worst part of the deal.
How could it get worse?
There was a clause buried in that NPA that I think is the most shocking legal document in modern American history. The immunity clause.
This is the get out of jail free card.
For everyone. The agreement stated that the federal government would not prosecute Epstein, and it also granted immunity to any potential co-conspirators.
Any potential co-conspirators.
Like,
that covers
Everyone. Everyone. Ghislaine Maxwell, the pilots who flew the planes, the recruiters who found the girls, the assistants who scheduled the appointments. It was a blanket amnesty. Epstein used his power to buy immunity not just for himself, but for his entire network.
And this clause didn't just disappear after he got out. It came back to haunt the victims for years later.
It was the weapon the defense used for a decade. Every time a victim, like Virginia Giuffre, tried to sue Ghislaine Maxwell in civil court, her lawyers would waive this secret agreement in front of the judge and say, look, the federal government promised they wouldn't prosecute anyone. You can't come after our client.
And the cherry on top of this toxic sundae? The victims didn't even know this deal was being made.
That is the final egregious violation. The Crime Victims' Rights Act is a federal law. It's not a suggestion. It requires that victims be informed and consulted about plea deals.
And they weren't.
Acosta and the prosecutors negotiated this MPA in secret. They kept the victims completely in the dark. They actually told the victims' lawyers that the investigation was ongoing when the ink was already dry on the deal.
They lied to them. Flat out lied.
A judge later ruled that this violated the law. Judge Mashri looked at the facts and said unequivocally that the prosecutors broke the law by keeping the victims in the dark. But by then, the deal was done.
Double jeopardy.
Double jeopardy had attached. You couldn't retry him for the same crimes in that district. The damage was done.
So, 2008 rolls around. He does his 13 months of work release. He gets out. And this brings us to what I call the untouchable years, from about 2009 to 2018. And you would think, logically, okay, he beat the system once, but now he is a registered sex offender. He's on the list. Surely he is being watched like a hawk.
You would hope so. But again, systemic failure after systemic failure. Epstein registered as a sex offender in New York and Florida? Yes. but he continued to live a life of extreme luxury, and crucially, he continued to travel.
We're not talking about driving to the next state over. We're talking international travel on private jets.
Yes. France, Vienna, Monaco, the Middle East, he was jet-setting across the globe.
How does a registered sex offender hop on a private plane and fly to Paris without setting off every alarm at the State Department, at the Marshal Service? How was that possible?
That is the failure of the U.S. Marshals and the probation system. There was a requirement for him to notify authorities of international travel, but the files that were released in 2025 show there was no international lookout placed on him until 2019.
Not until he was arrested again.
Right. He was flying under the radar, or rather flying right over the radar, and nobody was looking up.
And it wasn't just that he was traveling, it was that he was reintegrating into high society. This is the social failure.
Yeah.
He wasn't a pariah.
Not at all. He rebranded. He positioned himself as a science philanthropist. He was donating millions to Harvard, to MIT. He was hosting these dinners, the Edge dinners, where Nobel laureates and famous intellectuals would gather at his mansion.
It was reputation laundering.
Yeah.
Pure and simple.
Exactly. If you're seen hanging out with Stephen Hawking or Bill Gates or Prince Andrew, people assume you must be okay. He used these powerful connections as a shield. It was an open secret in these circles that he was a sex offender, but his money and his connections made him socially acceptable again.
And this gets back to the psychological control. Virginia Giuffre, who is really the hero of this story in so many ways.
Absolutely.
She kept fighting through civil lawsuits during these years when the criminal courts were silent. And she said something in a deposition that just chills me to the bone. She said Epstein and Maxwell told the victims, quote, "We own the police."
We own the police. That phrase sticks with you. And when you look at the facts, when you look at how he bought his way out of a life sentence in 2008, how the FBI ignored the case for a decade, how he was traveling freely, it's hard to argue with her logic.
To a teenager, it must have felt absolutely true.
It felt true because functionally it was true. They had total impunity. The legal system had validated their power over and over again.
And that impunity lasted until 2018.
For almost another full decade.
So how did the House of Cards finally fall? Let's move to Section 4, the resurgence. It is late 2018. Who finally broke the silence?
It wasn't the police, it wasn't the FBI, it wasn't a prosecutor, it was a journalist.
Julie K. Brown of the Miami Herald.
Julie K. Brown.
I remember reading that series when it came out. It was called Perversion of Justice. It was one of those moments where you could feel journalism changing history in real time.
It really was. She did the work the police and the FBI refused to do. She tracked down roughly 60 women. She knocked on doors. She sat with them. She listened to them.
And she exposed the deal.
She exposed the sweetheart deal. She put the details of that secret NPA on the front page of the newspaper for the world to see. She shamed the Justice Department into action.
It is a testament to the importance of a free press. I mean, without her work, Epstein likely would have died a free man in his mansion.
I have no doubt about that whatsoever. Her reporting caused a massive public outcry. It forced the Southern District of New York, a different federal office than the one in Florida, to look at the case again.
And they found a loophole.
They found a way around the NPA. They argued that because the New York office wasn't a signatory to the Florida deal, they weren't bound by it.
So the wheels of justice, very slowly, finally start turning. July 2019, Epstein is arrested.
He's arrested at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, returning from Paris, which again just highlights the travel failure right up until the very end.
And then the raid. They raid the Manhattan townhouse. This is the moment the veil was truly lifted. What did they find?
It was a trove of evidence. It confirmed everything. They found the massage tables. They found loose photos of young girls. They found huge amounts of cash, loose diamonds, and a fake passport with his photo but a different name issued by a non-existent country.
It was a go bag. He was ready to run.
It was the toolkit of someone who was ready to flee at a moment's notice. It proved that he wasn't retired. He was still very much active.
He's denied bail this time. Finally, the judge rules he's a danger to the community and a flight risk. He goes to the Metropolitan Correctional Center, the MCC. But then, August 2019 happens.
August 10th, 2019. He is found dead in his cell. The medical examiner ruled it a suicide.
And I know there are a million theories about this. The cameras were broken, the guards were asleep. We could do 10 deep dives on just that night. But regardless of how he died, The result was a catastrophe for justice.
It was a devastating blow to the victims. They wanted a trial. They wanted to face him in court. They wanted him to sit there, listen to their testimony, and be convicted by a jury of his peers.
They wanted their day in court.
And his death denied them that closure. The criminal case against him was dismissed because you can't prosecute a dead man.
But it didn't end the story. Because, as we said at the start, this wasn't just about one man. This brings us to Ghislaine Maxwell. For a long, long time, the narrative, often pushed by her own defense, was that she was just the girlfriend, just a socialite who was along for the ride.
And the evidence, especially the evidence that has come out recently, completely destroys that narrative. We need to shift our focus here. Section 5 is about Maxwell as the partner, not the bystander.
The boss.
Yeah.
So the SAV called her, right, in the depositions.
Yes. In the depositions released recently, the household staff, the housekeepers, the property managers, the pilots, they all said the same thing. Epstein was the money, but Maxwell was the CEO.
She ran the show?
She ran the houses, she managed the schedules, she hired and fired, and more darkly, she was the primary recruiter.
That is the key. She wasn't just passive.
That is the key.
Yeah.
She was the one who made the victims feel safe initially. She was a woman. She was posh. She had a British accent. She was charming. She normalized the abuse.
She was the bait.
She was the bait and the handler. She would be in the room. She would give the girls instructions. She transformed it from a scary situation with an older man into something that felt almost like a twisted mentorship program. It was diabolical.
So she wasn't just enabling it, she was architecting it.
Precisely. And in 2021, she finally faced a jury for that.
I followed that trial closely. Her defense strategy was interesting, essentially claiming she was being punished for Epstein's crimes because he was dead. The scapegoat defense?
It was a strategy of deflection. I'm the only one left, so you're taking it all out on me. The jury didn't buy it for a second.
Right.
They convicted her on 5 of 6 counts, including the most serious one, sex trafficking of a minor. She was sentenced to 20 years.
And we heard from victims in that trial. Ann Farmer, Maria Farmer's sister, testified.
That was a powerful, full-circle moment to see the accusers finally face her in open court. It was the first real moment of accountability in a saga that had spanned nearly 30 years.
But even with Maxwell in prison, the questions remained. Who else? Who else was on the island? Who else knew? And that brings us right up to the present day, the releases of 2024 and 2025.
Right, the Epstein Files Transparency Act. This was a piece of legislation signed into law, interestingly enough, by President Trump before he left office the second time. And this law forced the release of old case files that had been redacted or sealed for years.
And the internet went absolute wild. Everyone was looking for the client list.
We have to be very, very clear here for our listeners. There is no single document titled the client list.
Right, it's not a spreadsheet found in a safe with "people I sold kids to" written at the top.
Exactly, that doesn't exist. What we have are flight logs, message pads from the butlers, and, most importantly, mentions in civil depositions from the lawsuits.
So just being named doesn't mean you're a criminal.
Being named in these documents does not automatically mean someone committed a crime. It means they were in Epstein's orbit.
But that orbit was massive. And let's talk about some of the notable names that came up, because this is where the political football gets kicked around nonstop.
Prince Andrew is obviously the most prominent regarding allegations. He settled that civil lawsuit with Virginia Jeffrey for a massive sum of money. He denies the crimes, but the settlement speaks volumes to many observers. He's been effectively stripped of his royal duties.
And then the 2 U.S. presidents, Bill Clinton and Donald Trump.
Both appear in the documents. Both appear in flight logs.
But we need to nuance this, because the internet loves to paint with a very broad brush.
We do. Let's look at the facts in the files. For Donald Trump, the files released so far show he flew on Epstein's plane several times in the 90s, often from Palm Beach to New York. However, the documents released today do not contain evidence or testimony accusing him of engaging in any of the sexual acts or abuse with the victims.
So he was in the social circle.
He was in the social circle, certainly. They partied together in that era. But the smoking gun of abuse isn't in these specific files for him.
Okay, and Bill Clinton.
Clinton also appears in flight logs more frequently, it seems, than he initially admitted. He was also mentioned in depositions where victims said he was on the island.
Right.
Clinton has vehemently denied ever visiting the island and denies any knowledge of the crimes. Again, the files place him in proximity. They raise very serious questions about his judgment and his associations. But as of this recording in February 2026, there is no direct testimony in these files accusing him of assaulting a minor.
It really highlights how deeply Epstein had embedded himself in the elite. It wasn't just one political party. It wasn't Democrat or Republican. It was power. He collected powerful people like they were baseball cards.
He did. And that protection of power is what we see in the redactions.
Oh, the redactions. That was a huge controversy in late 2025, wasn't it?
It was huge. We had thousands of pages released, but huge chunks were just blacked out. Entire pages of solid black ink. It looked like a CIA file from the Cold War.
And then, in December 2025, some files actually disappeared from the DOJ website.
Poof. Gone. You click the link and it would say error 404, page not found.
That just fuels the skepticism, doesn't it?
It pours gasoline on the skepticism. You have Attorney General Pam Bondi making comments about a list on her desk, and then the DOJ issuing these cryptic statements saying no further disclosure is appropriate. It creates the sense that even now, in 2026, the full story is being managed, that there are still names too big to fail.
It feels like they're still trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube, but there's one area where the evidence is black and white, and that is the money. Let's go to Section 7.
Follow the money. It's the oldest rule in the book for a reason. You cannot run a sophisticated international sex trafficking ring without a massive financial infrastructure.
You need cash.
You need cash, you need wire transfers, you need to pay off victims to keep them quiet, you need to pay pilots, staff, everyone.
And this leads us to the banks, specifically JP Morgan.
JP Morgan. They facilitated Epstein's financial life long after his 2008 conviction as a sex offender.
We're talking about suspicious activity reports, or SARs. Explain what a SAR is for the listener who might not know.
A SAR is a report that a bank is legally required to file with the U.S. Treasury when they see a transaction that looks like money laundering, fraud, or some other kind of criminal activity. It's a red flag. It's the bank waving its arms and saying, hey, government, look at this. This isn't right.
And how many of these red flags did JP Morgan file regarding Epstein?
Over 150.
150.
Yes. Think about that. If you or I tried to withdraw $10,000 in cash, the bank would ask questions. Epstein was withdrawing hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash repeatedly. He was wiring money to young women with Russian-sounding names. The internal compliance officers at the bank were screaming about this. They were filing report after report.
So the bank is telling the federal government, hey, look over here. What did the Treasury or the FBI do with those flags?
Nothing. There is no record of federal law enforcement ever contacting the bank to investigate that money flow based on those SARs until it was far, far too late.
That is the boring part of the scandal that people skip over because it's about banking regulations, but it's actually the most damning part of the whole thing.
It is, because trafficking is a business. It requires logistics. It requires payments. The financial guardrails that are supposed to stop terrorists and drug lords, they simply didn't work for Jeffrey Epstein. Or maybe they were turned off.
Turned off. That's a scary thought. It implies active intervention, not just neglect.
It does, but when you look at the totality of it, the ignored police reports in '96, the halted federal indictments in '06, the lack of travel monitoring, the ignored bank reports, it's hard to see it as just incompetence.
Right.
Incompetence is usually random. This failure always broke in one direction, in favor of Jeffrey Epstein.
That leads me to think it was either profound indifference or active protection.
Or active protection.
So here we are, it's 2026, we have the files, we have the timeline, we have Maxwell in prison. But when you synthesize all of this, from Maria Farmer in 1996 to the document dunce of yesterday, what are we left with?
We are left with a 30-year timeline of missed chances. A 30-year timeline where the institutions we trust to protect children, the police, the FBI, the courts, the banks, prioritize the comfort and reputation of a wealthy, connected man over the safety of vulnerable girls.
And I think it's so important to center this